Okay, so I like to start these presentations off with giving some recommendations towards any kinds of publications that you can utilize pertaining to this particular topic. So we're talking about seed starting. There's an entire section in the Kansas Garden Guide that is specifically on pages 50 through 51. You can find the online version available as a PDF for free, but you can also purchase physical books of this at the extension office. Another publication I found, this one is more so aimed towards actual growers. So there's going to be a lot that doesn't apply to you if you don't have a, outdoor greenhouse. But that said, there's still a lot of those basic concepts that apply to seed starting. So if you really want to delve into the nitty-gritty of the science that's happening behind your soils and your germination and the temperatures and lights and whatever else you need to get to the seeds to sprout and do what they need to do, this is a really good publication. It's the Growing Growers, Growing Your Own Vegetable Transplants. Growing Growers is a program here based out of K-State that is aimed at helping establish new growers within our community, and they're actually expanding statewide right now. So very neat program, and it's very much aimed towards helping people that do this professionally. So it can obviously help you in a backyard gardening situation as well. And one more I found, if you're looking for something a little more simplified that encompasses everything that we're going to talk about really well, this is from MU. It's Starting Plants Indoors from Seed, and this is available online as well as a hard copy. So here's a little overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to delve into choosing seeds because that is a big, prominent, important part of your seed sowing is having the correct seeds that you're working with. Timing is going to be important as well as the actual establishment and getting them to grow and elongate. We're going to talk about hardening off, which is a process really important to keeping your seed transplants alive, and then the actual transplanting. So when it comes to choosing seeds, there are a lot of factors to keep in mind here. There's a big list here on this slide, but they're all important. So you want to look at, or you want to keep in mind when you are looking at seeds, the days to harvest is something that is going to be very prominent. So if you've got a specific window you're trying to work within to get your plants harvested and growing and to have a harvestable crop before certain weather conditions come around, that's something to be very much conscious of. Same with cold hardiness. That kind of ties into your days to harvest as well, because if something becomes too hot out, something becomes too cold out, you need to have your crop produced and ready to harvest before those cold days come around. Pest and disease tolerance and flavor and shape and size and color, these are all things that are similar traits that are passed through different varieties of plants. Your care requirements are going to differ, as well as the amount of yield, the nutritional content. So Chelsea may talk on this a bit, but when she discusses some stuff, but the nutrition of various varieties is going to differ. And then the pollination requirements, as well as the storage longevity. So all of these different components from start to finish are components to keep in mind when you're choosing your varieties. So some tips and tricks when you are choosing these varieties. You want to order early. Right now is the time to be ordering because they're going to sell out fast. And you also want to try to buy fresh. So you can try to save seeds, but the most reliable germination that you are going to get, or the most plants you are going to get and bang for your buck, it's going to be out of those newly produced and available seeds. Pay attention to your germination rate on that seed packet because sometimes depending on variety, the germination rate is not that high. So you may need to buy a little bit extra so that you can then still have those plants available to transplant. If you have saved seeds, you want to try to perform a germination test because, as I mentioned, it's not going to be as reliable to get those to start growing. And you need to understand variability in those seeds as well. So, unless you have grown those host plants or those parent plants in a completely controlled environment, cross-pollination exists, and you can get a crop that is not natural or not a carbon copy of its parent. Um, Use reputable suppliers when possible. This again is just going to come down to the quality of plant that comes through. So a lot of garden catalogs are out right now. A lot of your garden stores will be stocking quality seeds. It's not to say that the seeds that you can get elsewhere are bad. They'll still grow, they'll still produce a crop, but you may not be getting the most desirable traits out of it also. They may not be the most pest resistant. They may not produce the most. They may not be just the best plant that you can possibly get. Then if you are buying your seeds in bulk, and this more so applies to buying big amounts of seeds in bulk, you want to look at the percent weeds. This particularly in a vegetable garden setting will apply to like cover crops, but a lot of times if it says percent weeds on there, that means that a percentage of the seeds that are in that package are actual weed seeds. So you want to make sure that percentage is relatively low so that you're not battling those in addition to trying to to grow your crop. You also want to know the difference between heirlooms and hybrids, and I won't get too far into the weeds here when it comes to explaining this because we could do a whole presentation on genetics or somebody else could because it's a hard topic to explain. But know that there are heirlooms and there are hybrids when you come to your vegetable varieties. So with heirlooms, these consist of open pollinated plants, so they are openly pollinated. Anything that is pollinating comes to them, and that is how it's pollinated with stable traits that endure through generations. So essentially, the tomato that you have here is going to be the tomato you have through the next generation, the tomato you have through the next generation, so long as cross-pollination doesn't happen. So it does have to kind of keep the same genetic material going into the seeds, but you have stable traits that aren't going to be distinctive as far as the generations coming or the traits coming down from various generations. Oppositely of that, you have your hybrids. So hybrids, these are the ones that are largely going to be available through your garden catalogs right now. You'll see F1 hybrid mentioned a lot. That means it's your first generation offspring of two distinct parents. These are utilized because they offer improved traits and consistent performance. So these are the ones where it's you're looking for those specific traits and you're nitpicking, and this is what you want in your plant. So that is why these hybrids are grown. That said, they don't breed true again because you get that mixed genetic variability within the plants. Um, that said, when you're looking at your heirlooms, you get a specific genetic line, and you also get unique flavors with it. So there's benefits to both. And again, just putting a big emphasis on you need to be placing your orders right now if you're going to be ordering from any garden catalogs, because this is when people are ordering. Most avid gardeners actually probably have their garden catalogs in November, December, or many avid gardeners, and they've already had their wish lists. If they haven't placed their orders, they're doing so right now. The desirable plants will sell out very, very quickly. So in order to get yourself in line and get those plants that you want, place those orders now. And then you need to keep seed timing in mind when it comes to sowing your plants. In order to do this, you just want to subtract the growth period days, which should be indicated on your seed packet. If it's not, it's pretty easy to find online. Subtract that from your transplant dates. So whenever you are intending to put that into the garden, subtract how long it's going to take to grow that plant to size. And that's when you need to sow your plants. Um, Also keep in mind, plant your hardy plants first. Really our growing season technically can start here very, very relatively, or from late March to early April, depending on your hardiest of plants. So those would be the ones that you would want to be starting indoors first, then starting your others down the line. So watch your planting calendar. This one here on the right, so that comes from the Kansas Garden Guide. That's a good indicator of where you need to be working. Uh, Also keep in mind that some plants do not prefer to be started indoors. They like to be directly sown into the ground because they don't want their roots disturbed or they're too sensitive of plants to really handle that transplanting. So do your research a bit when it comes to the specific plants that you're trying to grow. So now we're going into the actual sewing of it and looking at the components of that. Your seed trays and your medium. So your soil medium, generally you can just use something that's labeled as a seed starting mix that you can find at excuse me, that you can find at most garden centers. These are meant to be well draining and they're meant to hold moisture. Holding moisture is going to be very, very important as these are trying to germinate. It cannot dry out. Otherwise, the tiny roots that emerge will just die instantly and you've lost your seed. Um, some things to keep in mind. The seed starting mix is generally going to consist of perlite, vermiculite, coconut coir, and peat. All of these, again, they're going to hold your moisture, but they're not going to be heavy and they're going to drain well. So it's, moist, but it's not sitting in a puddle, essentially. Um, and then you also want to take this mixture and soak it very well before you do any sort of planting in it. That's because it's going to sink quite a bit, and also just to make sure you're getting enough of the mixture into the cells themselves. Seed trays. You need to be looking at trays that are durable and not flimsy. So generally, I mean, these are going to need to be, utilized for quite some time. Um, they need to be able to hold their form at least for the period of growing, which can be anytime from 5 weeks to 15 weeks. So keep in mind it's going to be wet. It's going to be enduring varying temperatures. It's going to be in sunlight. All these factors can degrade plastic quite quickly. So investing in something that's a little bit sturdier is going to help you out. Tap and press to avoid air bubbles and settling. Again, these light mixtures they tend to have a lot of air in there, so that's going to help you with just compacting a little bit, but not to a point where the seed can't grow. And then after you've filled it in, tapped it, made sure that it's properly watered, you also want to try topping it off again because it's going to sink just a little bit, and you want those cells to have enough room for root expansion as they can. So when it comes to sowing your actual seeds, you'll have the directions on the label itself. But usually when it comes to planting depth, it's always going to be 2 to 3 times the width of the seed. So if you have a really tiny seed, chances are it's probably only like a 1/4 inch that needs to be buried or placed onto that soil. If it's a bigger seed, those are the ones that need to go about an inch down. It just kind of depends on what you're working with. Aim for 2 to 3 seeds per cell. Again, this is just going to account for those germination rates that are varying. So in that case, that you don't have a seed that sprouts, you have two others that are ready to go, or you may get some deformities and some of the seeds that sprout. So this will help in giving you the option to choose the best plant to then continue growing. Cover them lightly with soil. You want to make sure you're paying attention to the light requirements of the seeds growing, specifically with your annual flowers and as opposed to vegetables. Those are the ones that a lot of them actually need light exposure in order to be able to germinate. So you don't want to actually be burying those. So pay attention to what you're growing. Um, and then consider a tray cover or a plastic wrap cover. This is just going to hold that moisture in because you need consistently moist soil for this germination to happen. Um, so if you're in an environment where you can't provide, say, a mister on top of your plants, this is going to account for that. So when it comes to labeling, this is important as well, so you don't get your plants mixed up. But clearly label your trays, indicate what plant type and variety. Variety is one thing that I've found gardeners tend to overlook a lot because it's a lot of extra writing. But at the time when you actually need to know it, you need to know it. So keeping track of that is great. From the beginning and just make sure it's always there somewhere. Also indicate your sowing date because that can be easy to forget. So just keeping that in mind will help you know when your transplanting date is coming up. You can utilize craft sticks and permanent markers for this, or you can utilize PVC plant labels like the one in this picture. They also have waterproof and UV resistant labels for longer lasting scenarios if it's going to need to be, something that's established for a while. But we do like to, recommend going with those biodegradable options if it's going to be shorter usage times. When it comes to watering, as I mentioned, consistent moisture is your key. However, when the seedlings begin to elongate, the watering needs to be brought down to that happy medium. So again, it's the moist but not sopping wet. Um, the consistent moisture is key for the germination itself, and then it's just normal watering. There are a few different methods you can use to watering at this point. There's bottom watering, where essentially your seed trays sit within a tray, and then you just fill that tray with water, and then the water siphons upward. This will essentially allow the trays to absorb the exact amount of water they need, but then you need to empty the remaining water out of the out of the bottom tray, so that it's not sitting in water. There's your fine shower nozzles, and these again will help, especially with your not disturbing your soil. So if you are trying to top water, these are the ones that just place the correct amount of water on top without disturbing your plants. And then your mist bottles, those are probably best for your maintaining adequate moisture again. So say you don't have a cover on your germinating seeds, that would be best when those could be utilized. Looking at environments, the temperature range that you're going to generally look for is 65 degrees to 75 degrees, which is luckily what most windows sit at. So if you're just sitting in a window, you're good, usually. That said, some cool season plants will actually prefer colder. They'll prefer colder soil as well. So you'll need to make sure you're paying attention to what you're growing. And then if you are covering your plants, you need to make sure not to be putting it into direct light because you can get that magnifying effect that will essentially burn your plants if it's in that direct light. And then also, keep in mind that if you have a really cold house or something on those lines, a heating mat may be necessary because it does come down to soil temperature at a certain point when it comes to the success of these germinations. The light itself, seedlings will actually grow better under prolonged sunlight. So 12 to 16 hours per day under a grow light is ideal. That said, sunlight will do or will be just as effective, but you may get more elongated plants as they're trying to reach for that light. If you are utilizing a grow light, this one specifically applies to fluorescence. It should be kept 2 to 4 inches above the seedlings so that they're not stretching. If you're trying to be really safe with it and you don't want any chance of burning, you can probably stretch that to about 6 inches above the light. But as your seeds are elongating, you need to be tracking that and pretty much paying attention every day because you're going to have to start raising that light and keeping that distance the same. So if your plant's grow an inch in a day, you need to be raising your light an inch that day. So when it comes to synthetic light, we mentioned our fluorescents, but there's also our LEDs. Um, Full spectrum light is going to be ideal. This mimics natural sunlight and gives you those balanced blue and red wavelengths. There are LEDs out there that are adjustable as far as your spectrum and intensity go. These are going to be for your more intensive productions, but if you really want to get into growing plants indoors, these can help you out. These generally will want to be spaced 6 to 12 inches above the plant. And they are also energy efficient. And again, they allow that fine tuning. So if you really want to see what it looks like with a little bit more red wavelengths and a little bit less blue wavelengths, or if you think the plant's going to grow a little bit better that way, those are an option. You can stretch your light hours to 12 to 16 hours per day again here. So there's a benefit to your synthetic light. It's going to keep your plants more compact and a little bit less stringy. And also keep in mind, stands, hangers, timers, there's other components to these setups that can be a little bit pricey. So just know that it's not just purchasing the light. There's got to be a structure to it as well. So when it comes to then thinning your transplants, so you planted your 3 seeds, they've all emerged, and you're trying to figure out which plant you're going with. You want to choose your sturdiest stem and one that is not over elongated and one that is not stunted. Um, and so Really, yeah, just take a look over the three plants you have and try to designate which one looks the absolute healthiest. Uh, and then when it comes to transplanting, timing specifically, you know that it's time to be transplanting from your cells into a larger pot when they have developed true leaves as opposed to cotyledon leaves. So you see the cotyledon down here. That is what the plant looks like as it first emerged. Every one of them will always have those round, two round leaves. Those are not true leaves. Those are just a component to the seed emerging. Your true leaves are better shown here on the right, and those are the leaves that look specific to the plant that's being grown. So after you have two or three of those, that's when you know it's time to take it out of your seed trays and put it into a bigger pot. And so you allow those to grow throughout the season, and then finally it's time for your transplant date, or your transplant date is coming up, rather. Um, you need to be, cognizant of the fact that you need to be hardening off your plants. And this is essentially utilized so that you don't subject your plants to transplant shock. Remember, these are being grown in a controlled environment. It's indoors, it's nice, it's warm. Um, Putting them immediately outdoors where temperature fluctuations happen very quickly, wind is out there, you may have wildlife running by. There's a lot of stressors that can kill your plants off. So beginning 10 to 14 days before they're supposed to be transplanted, this is when you should start taking them outdoors, placing them outside um, in a protected area to kind of gradually acclimate them. And you can do this, for an hour the first day, and then an hour and a half the second or the third day. And then you kind of just gradually increase that time that they spend outdoors so that they have that acclimation. That said, don't push it too quickly. You've got 2 weeks. So yeah, definitely play it on the safer side initially. Some pests you may be encountering as you are trying to grow these indoors, or depending on, say you've got maybe an outdoor greenhouse type situation or home greenhouse situation. That's all going to be greenhouse pests, really. So you've got your aphids, which is typical to both indoor and outdoor. Neem oil or insecticidal soap is going to be your best option here. Fungus gnats, again, are an option, typical pest. Diatomaceous earth can help control these, as well as sticky traps. White flies, again, you're looking at your neem oil and insecticidal soap. And if you see slugs, diatomaceous earth will again help. The biggest thing with a lot of these pests is cleaning and sterilizing prior to planting. And that doesn't just apply to your pots, definitely does apply to your pots, but it entails the entire area that you're going to be keeping your plants in. If you normally keep plants in there and there's been an infestation in previous years, go through there and just thoroughly clean it, because if you've got any kind of eggs or what have you in that area, they can return very quickly. So just that sterilizing is going to prevent a lot of these issues, especially in an indoor setting. And then there are disease issues that tend to pop up as well. They're all fungal. There's dampening off. This one happens where essentially right at the base of the plant, the fungus develops, and then it severs the plant and they fall and die. There's powdery mildew. There is root rot, and then there's also gray mold that you see here on the bottom right. Removal and sterilization is always going to be great with these. Again, because you're in such a controlled setting, just kind of getting that away from the other plants is going to help. Also, moisture reduction and temperature control when that's possible, because both moisture and temperature are very important for your germination. And then if you do want to resort to a fungicide, a copper fungicide can help with a lot of these fungal issues. So I always like to end my sections with something fun. And I mentioned here that some seeds remain dormant for years before meeting the correct conditions needed to sprout. So stratification is the process of mimicking these conditions to break dormancy. These can entail seed soaking, breaking seed coatings with a hammer, scuffing seed coatings, freezing the seeds, even softening the seeds with a mild acid. You see pictured here on the right the Kentucky coffee tree, which has a bean that is really thick. I have memories of, trying to grow those in college actually as a class project, and me and my classmates sitting around and cracking those open with a hammer so that we could actually plant them. That there's certain seeds that need a lot of help to get growing. So something to keep in mind as you go forward with your seed starting ventures. And with that, I will open it up to questions, and we can allow Chelsea to get her slides pulled up here. Okay, I will let you take it away, Chelsea.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. And, this month, as I was thinking about what to share, kind of some healthy food highlights of other foods that we might just not discuss because we may not grow them personally ourselves. So, my name is Chelsea Reinberg, and I am the Nutrition and Food Safety Health Agent. I'm a registered dietitian, and kind of we do all things food and food safety related here. So, to get started, we're going to talk about dairy first and then move in nuts, seeds, and oils. And I picked these three main foods because they are foods that you often eat with fruits and vegetables. I think about like a fruit yogurt parfait. I think about adding some nuts and seeds to a salad. And then obviously, oil is kind of the foundational cooking as you saute your vegetables or add to a salad. So, we're going to talk about these three, go into a little bit more detail. So, we love our dairy. The US per capita dairy consumption jumped 12.4 pounds per person in 2021. This shattered the previous records, led by the strongest growth in the yogurt consumption area. And then dairy, as we know, includes milk, cheese, yogurt, and products made with milk, including ice cream, cheese cream, and butter, etc. However, when we talk about the My Plate and what is important for health, we really only focus on milk, cheese, and yogurt. And primarily, almost milk and yogurt are our two foundational ones, but milk, cheese, and yogurt are the three that really do count as a serving of dairy when we consume them. Unfortunately, ice cream isn't really counted as a serving of dairy when we look at our overall goals for My Plate. So, just a quick snapshot of what the dairy recommendations are. You may know that the US dietary patterns of My Plate suggest about 3 cups equivalent of low fat or fat free dairy foods per day. And again, that's milk, cheese, and yogurts. The healthy Mediterranean diet suggests 2 cups equivalents, and the healthy vegetarian dietary pattern is 3 cups. You'll see that all of those say low fat or fat free. However, low fat or fat free is promoted and recommended by all of these dietary patterns, but research has shown that full fat dairy really found no association between consumption of most dairy products and cardiovascular disease. The fat and saturated fat found in our dairy products is different than the saturated fat found in our typical red meats and other products like that. So, although it has saturated fat and higher fat, this fat has not been shown to have a significant increase in our cardiovascular risk. So, if you like 2%, or if you like to cook with whole fat milk, just know that that association isn't quite the same as if you were consuming red meat or other high saturated fat products. Here's just a quick snapshot of the nutrition. One of the common questions is sometimes, well, what's the difference between whole milk, skim milk, 2%, 1%? Really, overall, dairy is a nutrient dense food. So we have calcium, vitamin D, vitamin B12. It has proteins, fats, carbs, phosphorus, and potassium. All of those nutrients stay the same no matter if you have whole milk or skim milk. The primary difference is that fat content. As you can see, the protein stays the same. Really, the fat is the biggest difference. And when we look at it, we have 8 grams per cup whole milk down to 0 grams per cup skim milk. And when we compare cheese, cheese, milk, and yogurt, you'll see very similar nutrient profile. Our cheese there, those are the essential nutrients that are found in cheese: protein, calcium, phosphorus, vitamin B12, riboflavin, selenium, iodine, and niacin. Milk, as you can see, has a bit more. So milk has 13 of our essential nutrients, and the other ones have less. And then yogurt is there on the right. So overall, very much similar profiles. The differences may be in the fat content, the calorie content, potassium might change a little bit, and your calcium as well. So moving on to kind of the fermented dairy, which is primarily our yogurts. You may have not have known this, but fermented dairy, specifically yogurt, dates back to 6000 BCE, and its kind of association with health. Fermented foods, like our yogurts and kefir, which is a fermented kind of milk drink, are produced by increasing the acidity of the milk, and that therefore by adding that beneficial bacteria. So you probably have heard a lot about maybe gut health or that yogurt has probiotics and it's good for you. This is why, because of that fermentation process of adding that acidity and adding kind of that beneficial bacteria, it is better for our gut health. Foods that are rich in probiotics support a healthy immune system and help keep our gut nice and healthy and happy. So we do want to choose those fermented dairy products as well. Now you may be wondering, either I'm lactose intolerant or you know somebody who is lactose intolerant and they can't have dairy. So what about that? Basically, lactose is broken down by an enzyme lactase, and lactose is that sugar that is found in our dairy products. As we age, we lose the ability to break down some of that lactose. Our body just doesn't quite function the same, and that enzyme to break it down doesn't work as effectively and efficiently. So that's why you might see maybe you used to be fine, tolerate dairy, and as you now have aged, you just can't handle the dairy the same. And this is kind of one of those reasons. Interestingly, 65 to 70% of the world's population has a reduced lactose digestion, meaning they cannot digest lactose as once as what they were when they were an infant or a young child. Those who have more likely to have lactose intolerance include African Americans, American Indians, Asian Americans, and Hispanic or Latinos. And again, this is just because of different body compositions, different genetics, and that ability to break down those enzymes. Dairy foods like our milk, ice cream, soft cheeses like our cottage and ricotta are higher in lactose. So you may be one of those people who are able to tolerate a cheese. It doesn't upset your stomach, but you can't drink a glass of milk. And that's because the softer ones are higher in those lactose. Our yogurts and our aged cheeses are lower in lactose because of their production that's involved in that fermentation. So that natural bacteria tends to break down and consume some of that lactose because bacteria like you and I needs an energy or a food source. And so they rely on that lactose to have that as their food source and then therefore break some of it down. So that's kind of like the difference of why you might be able to tolerate some dairy, but not all dairy. So if you do have lactose intolerance or you choose not to drink dairy for personal preferences, there are other dairy alternatives available. So some of the common ones that you might see on the grocery stores are coconut, almond, soy, cashew, oat, rice, pea, and hemp milk. All of these are typically in the milk form, and more you're starting to find some in that yogurt form as well. What I caution with these dairy alternatives is to watch out for added sugar. If you've ever had plain soy milk, it might not taste quite as good as that sweetened soy milk. So just be aware that those added sugars can be quite high in some of these dairy alternatives. If you are looking for a dairy alternative that provides the closest nutrition profile to milk, that is going to be your soy milk in terms of nutrients, protein, all of your other minerals and vitamins. Your soy milk is going to be the closest nutrient profile to our standard traditional dairy milk. So now moving on to our nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are a great healthy addition to either have as a snack or to include in your meals. They have some protein, they have some of our healthy fats, they have some fiber, they're a good source of vitamin E, magnesium, copper, selenium, manganese, phosphorus, and antioxidants, which we learned from other presentations that antioxidants are good for helping keep our cells nice and healthy. What I do want to caution is that our nuts are higher in calories. So really modification is key. And I'm going to talk about kind of what that serving size looks like in the next coming slide. So there are different types of nuts and seeds. Here's just a breakdown, and this list is by all means not extensive and exhausted, but we have our walnuts, cashews, pistachios, Brazil nuts, pecans, peanuts, and then we have our seeds, which are more traditionally our chia, flax, hemp, pumpkin, sesame, and sunflower. One thing to note is that our nuts are basically the seeds of plants, trees, and typically there are trees or our legumes. Seeds, on the other hand, are from our vegetable, flower, or other crops. So that's kind of the main difference when we think about our nuts and the seeds. Both have similar nutritional profiles in terms of some of the nutrients they provide, but they do come from different components of our plants. So here's just kind of an example. This table is some nutrition information for a variety of nuts and seeds. So we have almonds, hazelnuts, pecans. This has pine nuts, pistachios, walnuts, Brazil nuts, cashews, macadamia. As you can see, we really have a calorie range from about 160 for our almonds and our pistachios up to 205 for our macadamia. So you can kind of see that range there for that calorie difference and how some nuts are definitely higher in calorie per ounce than others. The fat content is generally fairly similar. You will find that the higher, sometimes the calories, also the higher fat. So example, macadamia nuts is one of the higher fat nuts. And then on our lower end, we have our pistachios, our almonds, and our cashews. Protein, fiber, all of that stuff is listed there for those similar and different nutrient profiles. And then we have our nuts and seeds. Our nuts and seeds can be on the lower calorie side, depending on how much a serving size is. But again, it really ultimately comes down to how much you are eating. And so in the bottom, we have flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, and sunflower seeds are listed there. Two that aren't listed that I wanted to highlight because I think they're great additions to include in your diet is hemp seeds, which are a great source of protein. So for a quarter of a cup, you get about 10 grams of protein. They don't have quite as much fiber, but they are a good source of protein. And then chia seeds. And chia seeds have adequate protein at about 5 grams per ounce, but they're really high in fiber at 11 grams. So incorporating some of these nuts and seeds are going to give you more protein and some higher fiber. As I mentioned, nuts and seeds can be higher in calories. So we do want to watch them because they're higher in fat than some of our other foods. And so here's just kind of a visual representation of really what a 1 ounce serving looks like. When I say 1 ounce, it's really a quarter of a cup, but you might not always have a quarter cup measuring jar with you. So what does that look like? It's about a 3x3 sticky note, a shot glass full, kind of if you lay out those nuts on your smartphone, which I don't recommend doing that because your smartphones are very unhygienic, but gives you the visual representation. And then if you take your palm and just kind of fill this part of your palm, not your fingertips, but your palm, that is a handful, which is considered an appropriate serving size. So some ideas on how to consume our nuts and seeds. I love to sprinkle them on salads, in yogurt, on my cottage cheese. I like to blend them into cereals and smoothies. Toasting them, if you've ever had toasted nuts versus untoasted nuts or toasted seeds versus untoasted seeds, you can definitely tell the flavor profile is different. Toasting them brings out a great nuttiness, and so toasting them adds some additional taste as well as a crunchy texture to our different foods. Chia seeds are hydrophilic. They absorb several times their weight in water, so they're a great alternative to making kind of a healthier jam. So you could do a chia seed jam instead of your traditional higher sugar jam or puddings. It's also used in lieu of eggs in a vegan baking. And same with flaxseed. Flaxseed is also used for eggs. And then you definitely want to store them in an airtight container and in the refrigerator or a freezer because they are a high fat food. If you've ever had the experience where you tasted a nut and it just did not taste very good at all, that is probably because it was rancid, meaning that those fats became oxidized. And so to prevent that from happening, you want to store them in a cool, dark place. Okay, and then moving on to our oils. We want to eat more fat. There was the kind of low fat diet craze, which was many years ago. But what happened during that phase is they took the fat out of food because at that time fat was thought to be bad, and they replaced it with sugar. We know that fat is flavor, right? Something cooked in butter is more flavorful than something just cooked using no fat at all or no butter. And so eating more fat isn't necessarily bad. Our body needs fat. What we want to do, though, is we want to replace our saturated fats with healthier unsaturated fat. We don't want to replace them with refined carbohydrates, meaning we don't want to take fat out and add sugar in or add other higher carbohydrate foods. Consumption of a low fat diet has been shown to not be associated with a decreased risk of chronic disease or even helping you lose weight or maintain a lower healthy weight. In fact, the Mediterranean diet recommends 4 tablespoons of olive oil per day. And if you think about it, that is quite a bit, but that is the healthiness of the healthy oils like our olive oils to support our overall heart health, as well as just decreased risk of chronic disease in general. The other important thing with our healthy oils is that fat helps absorb our fat soluble vitamins. So, for example, our vitamin A, right? If we're trying to absorb that, we want to cook it with a healthy fat. So, putting some healthy olive oil on a baked sweet potato is going to help our body absorb those fat soluble vitamins a little bit better. And our healthy oils do contain vitamin E, and not many foods like our fruits and vegetables won't contain vitamin E. So our nuts, our seeds, and our healthy oils contain that really important nutrient. Here's just an oil comparison chart. And so the green oils are our monounsaturated oils. And we're not going to go too much into detail today about the difference between mono and polyunsaturated, but just know that all of our unsaturated fats are our more heart healthy, better fats. And then our purple maroon over here is our saturated fat. So we want to reduce our saturated fat and increase our unsaturated fat. I have my arrows drawn here to olive oil and avocado oil. And if we look at these nutrient profiles, we have 76% monounsaturated and 77% monounsaturated. And then we have a little bit of polyunsaturated. And then what I like to always point out to people as well is that you see here we have some saturated fat. So again, saturated fat isn't always bad. It's just where that saturated fat comes from and in what proportion or quantity. All different fats are going to have some saturated and some unsaturated. That is just the reality. Even your beef has, here you can see unsaturated and saturated. What I like to point out is that really our olive oil and our avocado oils are going to be 2 of our healthiest oils that we can consume. All oils can be healthy in moderation, but those 2 are the ones that are generally recommended for heart health purposes. You do want to select oils that is in a dark bottle. As I mentioned with nuts and seeds, those oils and fats can become rancid. Same with our olive oil. It can become rancid if it is exposed to light. So we want to choose ones in a dark bottle. It is best to choose extra virgin olive oil, and you want to make sure they're being stored away from light and heat. So if you have your bottle of oil sitting right next to your stove or even above your stove, you'd want to choose a different location to just take it away from that heat source by your stove. And then recommendations are actually to use olive oil within 30 to 60 days. So although it's super tempting to buy maybe a really large olive oil container from Costco or from another bulk retailer, if you can't really use that olive oil within a shorter period of time, you run the risk of that oil becoming rancid and losing some of its really beneficial properties. And then another thing I want to talk about is our omega-3s and our omega-6s. And if I go back to this slide here at polyunsaturated, you can see we have those breakouts of omega-3 and omega-6s. What I want to talk about is that we currently eat plenty of omega-6s. And actually, omega-6s may have a correlation with an inflammatory effect. And so if you are somebody who has a chronic condition or has some type of autoimmune disorder or an inflammation already in your body, then omega-6s you want to try to limit. And so some of these include our corn oils, canola, soybean oil, safflowers, and even some of our almonds, walnuts, sunflower seeds. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat any omega-6s because we do need them. The challenge is that we're eating too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s. And so our omega-3s are the ones that have been shown to have that really beneficial heart health and brain mood impact. And so these foods are our salmon, mackerel, cod liver oil, sardines, oysters, flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Again, we need both of these. We do need omega-6s and we do need omega-3s. The ideal ratio of what this should look like is we should be consuming 4 times as many omega-6s as omega-3s. The traditional Western diet of what we usually consume is actually we're consuming 20 times more omega-6s to omega-3s. So solution is eat more omega-3s, eat some more of those healthy fish and those healthy fats, and eat a little bit less of our omega-6s. And so if we think about the processed products that we buy, they traditionally use corn oil, canola, and soybean oil. They rarely will use olive or avocado. So we're getting a lot of additional omega-6 oils from our processed foods and not quite as many of our omega-3 oils. And then to wrap it out here, I have just 3 recipes. Although we aren't talking about fruits and vegetables, I still want to include some recipes. And so making your own homemade yogurt is actually very easy. You do need an electric pressure cooker, but you use milk and 2 tablespoons of plain yogurt. And you can make your own homemade yogurt in your pressure cooker. So the directions are there. You can either take a screenshot of it or you can go back to the recording after to get kind of the full directions. But if you've never made your own yogurt and you have a pressure cooker, I do highly recommend it. Super easy, cost effective, and it tastes good. And you can add your own flavorings, like if you wanted some vanilla. And then we have a roasted red pepper walnut dip. And so this uses those walnuts. It has some raisins, has some of that plain yogurt, some salt, pepper, and then a jar of roasted red peppers. And you toast your walnuts, and then you just kind of put it all in the food processor and refrigerate it, and then serve it with whatever you choose. And then the last one I want to talk about is making your own salad dressing. It's very easy to buy salad dressing from the grocery store, but a lot of these salad dressings are going to have those omega-6 oils that I had mentioned, your corn, your soybean oils, and we do want to incorporate some more of those avocado and extra virgin olive oils into our daily diets. And so substituting out and making our own homemade salad dressing using those oils is a great way. And so the general ratio for oils is 3 parts oil, for salad dressing is 3 parts oil to 1 part vinegar. However, definitely adjust to your taste preference. If you prefer a more vinegar-based dressing, then you can add a little bit more vinegar. Traditionally, you do need an emulsifier because if you've ever mixed oil and vinegar together, they definitely stay at separate parts of that jar. So you want to use some type of emulsifier to make sure that those oils and vinegars are blended together. Personally, I love Dijon mustard as my kind of go-to emulsifier, but you certainly could use avocado, honey, mayonnaise, any of those would work. If you are using a vinegar, we do always recommend that you add just a touch of sweetness to cut the acidity. And on the right here, I kind of have that chart of the types of vinegar and the acidity level. Just know that the more acid, the more vinegar, the more sweetness you're going to have to need to cut that vinegar. So if you're using like apple cider, that's a little less vinegar than say distilled white vinegar. You want to add in some flavors using the juice of citrus or zest, adding some of your fresh dried herbs, garlic, and again, mentioning using those avocado or olive oil based for optimal health. Store-bought dressings can be stored in your refrigerator for long periods of time. Anytime you make something fresh, it has a shorter shelf life because it doesn't have some of those preservatives that keep it on your shelf longer. Because of that, then you're going to want to use your homemade You're going to want to use your homemade salad dressing within 7 to 10 days and keep it in the refrigerator so that it doesn't go bad. And with that, here's my contact information. You can also sign up for our In Good Health newsletter. And if you have any questions, we have some time for those.
Okay, I believe there is one question on chat for you, Chelsea. It looks like it says, do you recommend an app that can help know serving size and calorie nutrition content?
There are there's a variety of apps out there, and they're all slightly different. Some of them are paid, some of them are free. So I do kind of recommend just doing a little bit of research and finding out which one is best for you. In terms of serving sizes, you can definitely go to myplate.gov, which gives you general recommendations about what is an appropriate serving size for a grain. So, for example, if it's a half a cup of cooked rice, that is kind of considered a appropriate serving size for some of our starches and our vegetables. It will give you some of that. Serving sizes is also very dependent on person to person and really ultimately your calorie needs. So I do recommend if you go to myplate.gov, or yeah, myplate.gov, you can type in your age, your weight, your gender, and it will kind of give you a recommended amount of calories that you should be consuming. And it then gives you the breakdown of those, how many starches, how many vegetables, because if you are a 150-pound woman, your serving sizes and nutrient needs are definitely going to be different than if you're a 350-pound Chiefs football player. So it's hard to say what is the appropriate recommendation for everybody, but that can be a starting place is to go to myplate.gov to really figure out what your specific needs might be, or to find a dietitian, and they're going to be able to help kind of walk you through what might be an appropriate serving or calorie need for you.
Okay. There was one other question here. I believe it was for me. It says, is a 10% bleach solution good for sterilization? So we were talking about sterilizing a growing environment or your growing equipment. And yes, that is what I would recommend is a 10% bleach solution. So, 1 part water to nine, getting that backwards, I apologize. 9 parts water to 1 part bleach. And then you just put that in a spray bottle, wipe down your area with that. Okay, well, we thank you all so much for joining us. Next month, our topic is strawberries. So if you are interested in growing strawberries, please be sure to join us again. This recording will be posted online very shortly. Thanks for joining us today.